This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. The Fantasy Nerd Show is sponsored by the Fan Up Network. They've developed the ultimate fantasy football app. It's a one-stop shop for everything you need. You can track teams and scores across multiple platforms, get latest injury and player news, and access to expert advice. See the hot trends with waiver pickups and drops. It has everything you need to manage all your fantasy football teams. Android users can get the app in the Play Store, and an iPhone version is now available in the App Store. Go to fanupnetwork.com to learn more and follow them on Twitter at fanupnetwork.
What's up, jerks?
Manning retired. Which one? Both.
I like kickers.
Put him on the board. Hausch Mazzoli. Got it. Championship.
Welcome to the Week 9 edition of the Fantasy Nerds. I'm away from my house. I'm out and about. I'm actually at the Grand Laurel Park Studios with another person. It's amazing. I'm not just talking by myself. Follow me on Twitter at Trevor the King. But with me, it's not my brother, I know. And you may get sick of him, but he's on all the shows. It's the doc. It's John Macaroon. He's going to talk some fantasy football with me before I go away on my vacation. It's my bye week, by the way.
Hell yeah, I'm a fantasy nerd. I've played fantasy football for quite a bit now. You know me, I'm texting you all my questions, all the questions that people ask me, lots of trade rumors. I'm having a good old time with it. And you should have me on because as it appears now, I have a better record than you do, sitting at 4-4 in one league and 5-3 in the league that I care about the most. With that, cousin Adam, my wife, and the family. I'm 5-3, sitting pretty, having a good old time with it because I got Drew Brees and Gronkowski carrying me.
All that matters is that you have more luck than me right now because I'm here to tell you, and I've said it before, I've said it pretty much from the first time I started this podcast, is that fantasy football is pretty much, I'd probably say 80 to 90% luck. Because you could be you could walk in off the street and draft a fantasy team. As long as you go by you could go auto draft and you could have the best team in the league. And then you can also study everything. You can look at all the reports, listen to podcasts. You can listen to me and then end up with an offer team. And I'm here to tell you that there's no way that you can possibly predict what's going to happen. You can only set yourself up in the best possible way to put yourself in a good position. And even then, it still doesn't work out because that's where I'm at right now. In my main league that I care, I will like to say that I'm 6-2 in my family league. So I am better than you in that league. So as I told Vito in their Churco and Company show, I'll say it again. I'll say it to you. Suck it, John. So I had to go back because in my Slackjaw league, I am the complete opposite. I'm 2-6, and my team just it doesn't work there. And some would like to say, oh, you drafted horribly. You had a bad team, and I'm here to say that I didn't draft horribly because I went back and I looked at my draft. I took all of my picks and then I cross-referenced it with their average draft positions. And I could go over every single pick that I made and where they were ranked in their ADP, what running back or what position running back or wide receiver they were. But what I'm going to say is that pretty much almost all of my picks were either right on the money in terms of ADP, like that's the route that they should have gone, or it was actually slightly better. So I really only took a couple reaches in this draft, and really that is what is killing me. And it's not even and this is where the sheer luck comes in. So my first overall pick, if you do miss out on your first overall pick, it's very hard for you to succeed in fantasy football. So my first overall pick at number 5, I took Adrian Peterson. He was rated at the number 10 in ADP. So I'm taking a little bit of a reach on him in the draft, but he was still the 4th best running back rated. And I was assuming I'm going to have him for the whole year. Obviously, he goes out for pretty much the entire season. So not much I can do about that. Russell Wilson, he was probably my next big reach. In round 4, his ADP was 51. So I took him about a round too early. But my thinking, I'm getting the third best quarterback in the league. And that, if you do have a quarterback who can carry your team, that's going to carry you towards the playoffs, towards possibly a fantasy championship. And Russell Wilson has done the complete opposite of what he's done his entire career. And then really the only other reaches were late in the draft. And they're actually the good picks. I took LeGarrette Blount about a round too early, and he's actually been my best running back. And I took Terrell Pryor about 3 rounds early, but he's actually probably rated as the best wide receiver on my team so far, because I took guys like Brandon Marshall, Demaryius Thomas, Golden Tate, all those guys I drafted where they should be, or I drafted them after they should have been drafted, and they just haven't panned out. So I'm here to tell you, don't worry about your draft, because there's honestly nothing you can do in the end.
See, I disagree a little bit in that I see that you use ADP rankings. You use probably the top couple hundred rankings from CBS and Yahoo Fantasy and ESPN Fantasy. But I'm here to tell you that potentially you might be looking in the wrong fashion in your team evaluations, in your player evaluations. What I did this year, and something that I think has helped me, was I didn't look so much at the player rankings. I looked at overall team defensive rankings, overall team offensive rankings from last year. And you looked at who were the top ranked offenses last year and who produced a lot. And you had teams like New Orleans, you had teams like Carolina, you had teams like the Raiders, you had teams that were putting up, obviously, the Patriots. You had teams that were highly ranked in offense. And I said, okay, who are some of the players that performed well? And then also something that I did this year that's allowed me to do something well is I looked at, in your ESPN app, it allows you to look at last year's teams and who drafted well and who ended up on certain rosters at the end of the year. So what I did was, in my preparation this year, I didn't look so much for the players. I went with a specific strategy, which I'll describe in a few seconds, and I went with a strategy of looking at who ended up in the playoffs last year and who ended up on their rosters. And so obviously one of the guys that got to the finals had Drew Brees on his team. So I circled him as a guy that I maybe wanted to target. And I looked at some of the top ranked offenses in terms of, who's likely going to have a solid system in place that you obviously see now. A guy like Brandon Cooks is doing some things paired with Drew Brees. You see, obviously, the New England Patriots and Tom Brady, they're always up there. You see the, Pittsburgh and Ben Roethlisberger, they're usually up there in terms of production, obviously with Antonio Brown. And so I went with the strategy this year of looking at who were collectively as, NFL team doing well on offense. And I went with the strategy that a lot of people have been talking about, and it's working okay, but it's causing me a lot more headaches than I like, in that I have a week-by-week running back, in that I'm picking up a running back every week on the waiver wire, and I've gone 5-3. Last week I got lucky hitting on Mike, Gillislee from Buffalo. He got 80 yards and a touchdown, but, obviously I got lucky in that aspect, being that McCoy got hurt. So I'm in a situation where what I'm doing is I had a lot of solid running backs, Amir Abdullah, Langford, but they're all hurt. So week by week, I'm running, really solidly with my wide receivers. I'm working with Diggs, Gronkowski, Mike Evans, Kelvin Benjamin, and Drew Brees. So they're carrying me, and week by week, I'm just going to who's projected to score the most on the waiver wire in terms of running back, and I haven't made any moves yet to try and upgrade my team, but I'm scoring over 105 points on average per week, so I've been pretty satisfied with this strategy, but it is a lot more of a headache because now I'm in a situation where a lot of my guys are on buys. I mean, look at my running backs. I got Davis from San Francisco on my bench, Whitaker from Carolina, Langford, and Gillislee right now are my running backs. Awful. They're not even projected, this week to get maybe 10 points combined, all 4 of them. But my, obviously with Drew Brees dropping almost 30 to 50 every week, you got Diggs, Gronkowski that are performing. So I went with that strategy. I'm trying to evaluate and see how that's going to play out for me in terms of playoff success. But I think if you try different strategies and maybe look at team stats more than individual player stats, you might have an opportunity for more consistent success.
You can say,
I don't think it's luck. I don't think it's luck.
It
Jason.
is all luck, John.
No, it
you
isn't.
could say that. You could do the exact same thing next year, and you're probably going to have a complete opposite thing. So you're telling me then, so I'm looking down my roster. Adrian Peterson, obviously, I think that's a whole other thing. You lost him to injury. and that's going to obviously kill your team. So Brandon Marshall, last year, he was on a pretty decent offense with the New York Jets. Ryan Fitzpatrick seemed to be improving. Last year, he had 109 receptions, 1,500 yards, and 14 touchdowns. Halfway through the season this year, he has 34 catches, 540 yards, and 2 touchdowns. How are you going to predict that? How could you predict that? It's the same quarterback. They even get Matt Forte, a better running back. You would assume he's going to be fine. I go to Demaryius Thomas. Now I get he didn't have a great quarter. He still had Peyton Manning last year, but he wasn't the Peyton Manning of old.
Well, how do you predict that? You predict that with kind of, obviously the trend of the team. You think Ryan Fitzpatrick...
They just won the Super Bowl.
No,
you're talking about the Jets.
Yeah, the Jets. Now, with the Denver Broncos, they got a new quarterback. So obviously you might rank their wide receivers a little bit lower than a team like New Orleans, who has Drew Brees, who's had consistent success, or maybe Phillip Rivers, who from time to time will put up a lot of consistent points, or a team like the Lions and Matthew Stafford. You also have to look at what you're seeing in terms of what the team's doing too. A new quarterback with Trevor Siemian. Did you really think going in that the wide receivers from Denver were going to do a lot of things?
What I drafted Demaryius Thomas for, I drafted him as my second wide receiver. Okay. Now, I think that is appropriate to think what Demaryius Thomas could do, because I think in years past, Demaryius Thomas is looked at as a wide receiver 1. I drafted him as my wide receiver 2 because he's going to have a new quarterback, a new system, or it's not a new system, but a quarterback who's getting used to this, even though Simeon had been in the system for last year. So I didn't expect him. I expected him to have a drop-off. I didn't expect him to have the drop-off that he's having so far. Emmanuel Sanders is the number 1 guy there. So I get it. You can have a strategy. I think there are some strategies that will put you in a good situation. But even if you have a foolproof situation, there's never there's nothing that's 100%. There's nothing that you can just point to and go, this is what's going to work.
Well, the luck factor plays in terms of when you start the guy, whether he actually stays in the game and doesn't get hurt throughout the course of the game. Because I think what's decimating a lot of teams is injuries in game. You got situations where running backs are going out. You got top guys like LaShawn McCoy, who's not been in there consistently. You got injuries that do play a part. And then you have the bench where you have situations where you make a decision on who you're going to start in your lineup. And sometimes it doesn't work out. Like last week, I would have, could have made a mistake because Stafford blew it up and I have Drew Brees. So, and this week I could have been, challenged in that Blake Bortles got 38 points in garbage time. And Drew Brees didn't perform to that level. But it works out because collectively as a team, you got to have more guys perform than not. And that's just the name of the game.
I point to the quarterback. Myself, I drafted Russell Wilson. He's on the Seattle Seahawks, who are perennial Super Bowl contenders. Their offense last year looked like it was trending. No more Marshawn Lynch. You're going to be trending more towards the passing game. So how's that wrong, drafting Russell Wilson high? And then I'll even point to Cam Newton, too. I'll
tell you why. Because, Jason, the Seattle receivers are solid, but they're more guys that you suit majority-wise in the flex position. Wide receivers from Seattle typically
I'm not talking about the receivers. I'm talking about Russell Wilson.
Yeah, Russell Wilson as a quarterback as well. It's a running team. And philosophically, don't you think that Seattle wants to control the ball and kind of be ultra conservative? Even a top game from Russell Wilson, what's he going to perform really for you? I think you got guys, and you got to look at their ceilings too. A guy like Drew Brees' ceiling is going to be 50 points. A guy like Derek Carr's ceiling could be in the 40s to 50s. I think a ceiling for Russell Wilson game in, game out,
still 40 to 50 points.
I don't think so.
He can throw the ball.
Not
when
consistently.
He's healthy, he can run the ball.
Yeah, but I think his ceiling consistently is around 18. I think his ceiling is 25. He doesn't get that many points. I would say that I would not draft Russell Wilson. I would have not drafted him.
I don't know what league you're in then, because they do it. They have very similar. They're both top quarterbacks. I bet you if you go back to last year and you look at the totals for who was the better quarterback, you're going to see them both right up at the top.
So where was Russell Wilson ranked in terms of the pre-draft? Top 5?
He was quarterback number 3.
Russell Wilson was 3?
Yes.
Sometimes you have to go by the eye test, then I would not have drafted him 3. I could pick 3 off the top of my head. I would have went Stafford ahead of him. I would have went Drew Brees ahead of him. I would have went Derek Carr ahead of him. I would have went Blake Bortles ahead of him. No doubt about it.
I don't believe you. If you would have drafted Derek Carr or Matthew Stafford before Russell Wilson,
no doubt I would.
You would have been laughed at.
Well, listen, you know what I did? I'm sitting here 5-3. I drafted Denver's defense. They were ranked 2nd in terms of the position, and look what they did last week. And people were laughing at me. I drafted them early, and they weren't even the number 1 defense, but I knew that they were going to be solid with Von Miller.
What about Cam Newton then? Would you draft Derek Carr and Matthew Stafford over Cam Newton?
Now, the argument for Cam Newton, looking back at it, is a lot of teams, after they get the berth to the Super Bowl, don't make the playoffs. Would I say that he's going to have a terrible fantasy year? No, not. I'm not surprised by it, but he's a guy that's getting beat up a lot, and he's a guy now that, you got to remember trends, that he had a solid couple years, but at the same time, he might have been, poised for a letdown, knowing that coming off of the Super Bowl run, and the fact of the matter is, you got guys coming back, and it's a different offense year in, year out. Cam Newton, I would have no problem if somebody drafted Cam Newton, no doubt about it. He's a guy that can do things on his feet, and he's younger than Russell, or I think he's younger than Russell Wilson, or he's at least, I think, better than Russell Wilson. So what it
comes down to, it's all about luck.
No, it's not all about luck. The skill involved.
All about luck.
No, it's not all about luck. It's a factor. Luck, I would say, is 30%.
Luck is at least 50% of it.
No, 30 to 40% max. The luck factor is if your guy goes out and his quarterback goes out in the midst of the game, or if something drastically changes throughout the course of the game that dictates, if you have a team that has a solid running back and all of a sudden that defensive performance isn't good and they have to throw the ball a lot of times during the game. But I think you're overvaluing it, and by telling yourself that, I think it might allow you not to put in the work that you need to do in order. You have to do a lot of work in terms of knowing what these players are going to do, the trends, and knowing what guy to start at the right time, what guy to try to trade, what guys that you might be willing to pick up on the waiver wire or let loose at certain times. There is a lot of skill involved, and I think you're discounting greatly the skill involved in fantasy football.
I don't think you've been playing fantasy football long enough.
I'm playing a long time, and I see the same guys, in my family league at the top, and I see the same guys at the bottom. I think that you can get better at fantasy football in terms of your preparation and things like that, but I think if you value luck over skill in fantasy football, I think that you're doing yourself a big disservice.
I'm not saying that it's that you can't go in blind, that there are skill moves. And another thing that I preach is that you minimize risk, is that you take those guys who you think are going to minimize risk. And when I drafted my team, that's what I did. When I picked Russell Wilson, I looked at the rest of the draft board, and I saw guys like Jarvis Landry, Julian Edelman. Those are guys who were taken after me that I could have taken instead of Russell Wilson. And I assumed taking Russell Wilson at that point is probably safer than taking a second wide receiver who I don't believe in. I don't believe in Julian Edelman because I knew Tom Brady's not going to be there for the first 4 weeks. Jarvis Landry, I don't think he's on the Miami Dolphins. He has Ryan Tannehill. So there is skill, and then there's just it's either going to happen or it's not going to happen.
Really? Did you start to believe in this luck factor over the course of this year, or have you been starting to feel this way all along?
I've felt this is how it is all along. I put in the work. I look at, if you think that I'm just drafting for just random reasons, then you're dumb.
No, I think that I just think that you're discounting a lot of factors that are, skillful in fantasy football in terms of making the right trades, in terms of the drops and adds and who you start and sit. You start to see the same guys. Look in your league. Let's look at your league specifically, the Slackjaw League. Are the same guys roughly in the top 4 or 5 every year? Have you had multiple champions? Have you had guys that have had consistent success in that league?
We have had multiple champions. And what I then go
guys that have won the championship more than once?
What I then go to is that if you have a bad draft, unless you get lucky and you pick somebody up on the waiver wire and you can change your team that way, or if you can trade, which there are 2 guys who can consistently trade because they consistently talk with everybody in the league. So they're able to get more trades to happen. So, John.
Okay.
It's all about luck. Have you ever won a championship?
I have won one, but it's not in a distant memory because my time allocated for fantasy football has gone down and down. And it's just hard nowadays to keep watching all these games because of all the injuries, the stoppages, the quality of games. I think you said it before we started today. The 1 o'clock games on Sunday are horrid.
They're awful.
The matchups are terrible. It's hard to sit down and really invest in watching a lot of these games. I think a lot of people are watching the red zone or just the touchdown packages that they got out there just so they can avoid watching so many commercials and things like that. So for me, in terms of, preparing my fantasy team, it's gone, the time I put in has gone way down. But at the same time, I do look at projections and I do look at kind of matchups here and there. And I think I've done pretty well. I've dropped over 100 points more often than not.
If you've said that, you've actually decreased your time preparing. And wouldn't you say that then luck still has a lot to do with it? At least 50% to do with how you can prepare all you want, but there's still it's still a 50-50 chance that your guy is going to go out there and put up a big goose egg, or he could go off and for 10 catches, 200 yards.
Well, you got to remember too, the skill involved in terms of where you need to be is placing the right guys on the bench versus who's going to start for you. And so the skill involved is making sure potentially that you're having more often than not guys that you pick up perform. Like if you constantly go to the waiver wire and pick up guys and you put them in, they get 0 all the time, then there's a skill involved that you don't know what you're doing in terms of picking. This year I've made 3 to 5 moves where from the waiver wire have gotten me at least 10 points. Picking up Brandon LaFell, he was on the waiver wire. And I saw the week before.
Luck.
No, it's not luck.
All luck.
How is it luck? It's a trend. I looked. I saw that LaFell had had kind of been trending upward.
Who did you play LaFell over?
I played LaFell over Calvin Benjamin. And this week, it turned out that LaFell didn't perform as well as Calvin Benjamin did. But it wasn't a massive issue because I had other solid wide receivers. You can take chances. I got Mike Evans. I got, Diggs. I got Gronk. So you can, kind of, minimize your risk if you take a chance like that. So I feel like I did.
And when you have a team where everything is working out, it's easier to take those risks. It's easier when you have an Antonio Brown and you have guys who are going to score more, and to say, oh, I'm going to take a chance on a Terrell Pryor on the Browns. I'm not sure if he's actually going to do anything. I think he might. I have a feeling, but he could blow up. And then if he does blow up, you're like, oh, I'm a genius. This is my skill. But if he doesn't, you're like, I don't care. But when your team, you're all already behind the 8 ball, when the team that you draft isn't performing the way that they're supposed to, then it's hard to take those risks.
The skill is in making the moves to change your team. That's the skill involved. How many moves you make, when you move them, and then making the trades. And like you said, the guys that make solid trades and can get value for their players and can take advantage of some situations. That's the skill involved.
Well, I think we're just gonna have to agree to disagree. I think it's at least 50% luck. It's a 50-50 shot, because you never know when that guy is either gonna tweak a hamstring, or they're not gonna throw the ball to him. It's just like that.
Well, the skill involved in terms of your research is going to multiple places, looking at different projections, looking at past performances. Then you mitigate the luck that's involved by potentially knowing that, okay, if there's a chance he's not going to perform well, you put him on your bench. That's simple as that. I think that there is, like in anything, definitely luck involved, but not 50. It's not 50% luck, because if it was 50% luck, then every single week you'd have, you wouldn't see solid trends. Like the guys that perform well in fantasy tend to stay at the top of the league rankings, and the guys that stink will always be at the bottom. That's just the way it is. So that's where the skill comes into play. And there's a skill involved in terms of asking the right people. If you ask a guy over and over again for advice and he gives you the wrong advice and you keep asking, then that's on you.
What would you say? Have I given you worse or better advice?
Since I've talked to you, I've done significantly better. I've had less guys blow up on the bench. I have a solid lineup week in, week out. And more often than not, I've been above 500 in my leagues. But you're not the only guy I talk to. I talk to other guys. And so usually I take a consensus of like 3 to 4 people, and I go from there. But most of the time I feel basically I'm getting to the point now where I'm in line with what you guys are telling me. It's not like I have too many decisions where I go, I'm really struggling based upon how my team is. And I think the skill in fantasy football involves the amount of preparation that you do versus, two, what you're looking at. You could be looking at the wrong things. You could be looking at maybe the wrong matchups. You could be looking at the wrong trends. You could be looking at wrong stats. You got to look at a lot of things, and sometimes you might be looking at factors that might not help you if you just solely look at projections. You could also be looking at the previous performances. From time to time, I'll go in and look at how has Diggs done versus the Lions in the past. How many fantasy numbers has he done in the past? And then I'll look at, okay, if I got another guy, does he have a better matchup this week? And then what's the weather going to be like? You look at a lot of different factors, but in the end, yes, the 30% luck goes in that, hey, you can't control if he goes into the game and rolls his ankle on the first play. That's the luck, but it's not 50%.
So you heard it from John. I'm still an expert. He'll still listen to me, whatever I tell him. So let's move on to a couple quick matchups before we wrap up this episode. I'm not going to go over everything because as we are recording this early, not all the information is out. And I'm going to say with all of these matchups and with everything this week to check the injury report and make sure your guys are playing because you never know what's going to happen. I'll start off with the team that we love the most, the Detroit Lions. They travel to Minnesota, taking on the Minnesota Vikings.
Isn't the game at Ford Field this week?
No, it's at Minneapolis. It's at Minneapolis.
It's not at home this week. Oh boy.
So you have the 4-4 Lions against the 5-2 Vikings. I think Matthew Stafford's probably going to struggle a little bit against this Vikings defense, and they may try and go to the run. So Stafford might struggle. I don't have him in the top 10, or at least he's probably on the borderline of the top 10 this week. And then I think Marvin Jones and Golden Tate are probably at best. I like them in flex plays, but as I said, with the Vikings, they're probably gonna struggle a little bit. On the other side, with the Vikings, Sam Bradford, it's hard to actually start him in fantasy football, but going up against the Lions, it's a decent matchup, especially if Darius Slay isn't gonna play. I'd probably still advise not to start him, but if you're one of those risky players, then maybe go for Sam Bradford with his hookup to Stephon Diggs.
Man, Lions. Always, when you play against the Lions, man, it's sometimes you realize, oh boy, the defense for the Lions struggles, and some guys can put up some things. But then, right when you need them, that's where the luck comes in. When you need the opponent's offense to do some things against the Lions, they don't. So I try to avoid, as a general rule, the Lions games in general.
And I think that's changed over the years. I think you used to always were like, oh, they're playing the Lions, I'm going to put them in. Now, I mean, guys like a Todd Gurley, you would have expected him to go off against the Lions. Didn't happen. Another one I want to point out, 1 o'clock game, Steelers at the Ravens. And really the big thing to really look at is going to be Ben Roethlisberger. Is they're saying that Mike Tomlin came out, said that there's a chance that Big Ben might play. So if you do have him on your roster, watch, because the Ravens aren't that great of a team. And if he is playing, I think you definitely start him this week.
Eric Ebron, should I pick him up? Because I got Gronk. He's projected to get 7.
I don't know. I don't see the
risk.
No, the worst you're going to get is that Ebron does nothing. But I think that's really the risk with any tight end that's on the waiver wire at this point, is that you're probably not going to find one of those top tight ends. And a tight end usually only gets you a couple points anyways. Ebron, who knows? Maybe they go to Ebron more. I think he finished with the most catches in the Lions in this last game. Going to the 4 o'clock games, you got there's just not a lot of good slate of games this week. Yeah. I'm looking, you got the Panthers.
Good week, take a vacation, as some would do.
I know, right? Panthers, Rams, Saints, 49ers. I would point to the Colts at the Packers. You got Andrew Luck against Aaron Rodgers. The Colts are, even though they're 3-5, I think they're still in their division, and the Packers are going to have to win if they want to stay right in step with the Lions and the Vikings. So it could be an interesting matchup between both of these guys. Aaron Rodgers going up against another depleted defense, so it could be a pretty good game for him. I mean, what do you think?
Man, what a performance that he had versus Atlanta. I mean, a lot of people are talking about Aaron Rodgers kind of struggling. I just think that you can't count a guy like that out. I mean, in fantasy, just when you decide to put a guy like Aaron Rodgers on the bench, he goes off for 45. So if you're going to bench Aaron Rodgers, you got to have another top guy out there. So as long as he's healthy and he's doing some things, you got to throw him in there.
I think that's where luck comes in. When you have those top quarterbacks, guys like Cam Newton, Aaron Rodgers, when they're having poor performance after poor performance when it's making that decision of, do I put in a guy like Carson Wentz or Dak Prescott who may be performing better fantasy-wise, and risk that Aaron Rodgers goes off? Because Aaron Rodgers, that's where you look at the ceilings, because Aaron Rodgers does have a very high ceiling, and your backup probably doesn't have as high of a ceiling, even though Aaron Rodgers hasn't been doing it. So a lot of luck there. And then Sunday Night Football, you got the Broncos at Raiders. I think this is, Derek Carr, I think he's right on the verge of being a starting quarterback in fantasy, and obviously a tough matchup against the Broncos. So I probably wouldn't start him this week. It's a tough matchup, with the defensive backs they have, and Von Miller is going to be coming after him. And I don't really see a good game for the Broncos offense either. They're hurting with CJ Anderson. They're going with their rookie running back in Devontae Booker. This could actually be kind of an ugly game.
And in the game that I've been targeting, because I got kickers going at it, I'm liking Dak Prescott, and I'm liking what Dallas is going to do going to Cleveland. There could be some massive numbers going on there. And, I have Williams from Dallas. I know that, Des Bryant and Dak Prescott, people are looking at, well, is he trying to force the ball to Des Bryant? But I like a lot of the offensive weapons for Dallas in this game for sure. Dak Prescott, Jason Witten, Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah, that's the guy that I would highlight this week. Ezekiel Elliott could have a monster game. They may limit him if they get up in this game, and you could see Alfred Morris late. So Alfred Morris might actually be, I think Ezekiel Elliott has a good day. And if you have Alfred Morris and you're struggling at the flex, because this is a week where there's a ton of buys, you got the Bears, the Bengals, the Patriots, the Cardinals, the Redskins, and the Texans. Those are all teams that have
offensive scoring, yeah.
They all have really good running backs. I'm just looking, Bears, you got Jordan Howard, Jeremy Langford. Bengals, you got Bernard and Hill. Patriots, you got Blunt and White. Cardinals, David Johnson. Redskins, Matt Jones, even though he's hurt. And then Lamar Miller from the Texans. This is a week where people are going to need running backs. And Alfred Morris might be a guy who you might want to circle that he's not going to get you a ton of numbers, but he might play enough in this game where he could get you 60 yards, 70 yards, maybe get a touchdown. But you have anything else to say to wrap up this podcast, John?
Well, I wish you luck in terms of the rest of the way in your fantasy season, but I believe that I'll just go along, continue on my path of success, and I think based upon this podcast today, I'm going to finish way ahead of you this year. No doubt about it.
Well, you enjoy that. I'm going to go steal some more of your Halloween candy. But
enjoy your trip. Great stuff so far. All I can say is, you've helped me definitely improve my fantasy results. No doubt about it.
Well, I wish you all better luck than I've had in the Slackjaw League. I will again say I'm 6-2 in my other league. Anyways, until next week, good luck everybody in week 9. I'm Jason Jarvie. He was John Macaroon. Later, nerds.
Manning retired.
Which one?
Both.
I like kickers.
Put him on the board. Howsham Mazzoli. Got it. Championship.